Alex had never been one for crowded streets or city noise. After years of apartment living, he dreamed of a quiet place by the water, where mornings began with birdsong and the occasional ripple of fish breaking the lake's surface. When he first found his lakeside property, it felt like a small piece of paradise. Wide open skis, a gentle slope leading to the water, and a patch of land large enough for a houseboat, a dock, and a small garden. He had pictured himself sipping coffee on the dock, tinkering on the boat, and watching sunsets that painted the lake in gold and amber. It was simple, yet perfect. Across the hedge from Alex lived Karen, a woman whose eyes seemed to miss nothing. She wore her sense of order like a badge of honor. Her lawn was immaculate, her garden meticulously arranged, and even the placement of her mailbox was perfectly aligned with the sidewalk. Karen was polite, at least formally, but her attention to detail could make neighbors feel scrutinized, whether intended or not. Alex had met her briefly when he first moved in. She smiled, nodded, and said, "Welcome to the neighborhood. I hope you enjoy living here." That was the polite part. The moment she noticed his houseboat parked by the lake, her interest turned from cordial to critical. At first, the signs were subtle. A small note appeared on his mailbox. "Houseboats must comply with all neighborhood standards. Please confirm your understanding." Alex read it, raising an eyebrow. He had checked the association rules carefully before moving in. His property deed and the county records clearly permitted his dock and boat. Still, he placed the note in a drawer, figuring it was nothing more than a misunderstanding or a friendly reminder. But over the following weeks, the notes became more frequent. They were increasingly specific, questions about the placement of his boat, the type of dock he used, even the hours he spent on the water. Alex began to notice Karen walking her dog along the edge of the property, sometimes stopping to peer at his boat as if cataloging its every feature. Other neighbors watched from a distance, some curious, some uncertain, but none intervened. Despite the growing tension, Alex tried to maintain his routine. He spent mornings on the lake, checking lines and sails, enjoying the solitude that had drawn him here in the first place. He pruned the small garden near the dock and repaired a few boards on the boat, humming quietly to himself. He didn't want conflict. He only wanted to live peacefully on his property. One afternoon, Karen approached the edge of his property without knocking, glancing at the boat with her characteristic frown. "Alex," she said, her voice clipped but polite, "I noticed some things about your dock. I think the neighborhood association might have concerns." Alex paused mid-sweep of the deck. "I've checked everything," he said carefully. "Deed, county rules, association guidelines, everything seems fine." Karen tilted her head, a subtle but unmistakable expression of disapproval. "Well, sometimes rules are more nuanced than they appear. I just wanted to make sure you're aware." He nodded, returning to his work, though a small knot of unease had formed in his stomach. Something about her tone suggested this would not be the last interaction. As the sun dipped lower over the lake, the water shimmered and reflected his little world of peace, yet he sensed a shadow creeping closer. Karen's vigilance hinted at challenges ahead, and for the first time, Alex realized that living by the lake was about more than enjoying the scenery. It was about navigating the social currents as carefully as he did the water. By the end of the week, he found another note, more formal this time, slipped under his door. It was from the neighborhood association, signed with an official stamp, stating that his houseboat might be in violation of unspecified guidelines and requesting clarification. Alex frowned. He read it twice, even 3 times, but the words were vague and left much open to interpretation. A quiet determination began to build in him. He would not ignore this. He would research, document, and prepare to show that his life on the lake was within his rights. As night fell, Alex sat on the dock, watching the lights of the neighborhood twinkle across the water. Somewhere across the hedge, Karen's house glowed like a carefully staged painting. He thought about the weeks ahead, the careful steps he would need to take, and the principle at stake. It wasn't just about a boat or a dock. It was about fairness, about knowing your rights, and about living freely on your own property. With that resolve, he made a quiet promise to himself. He would meet any challenge calmly, patiently, and fully prepared. And for now, the lake remained his sanctuary, a place where he could gather his thoughts and plan his next moves. The following week, Alex began receiving more letters from the neighborhood association. Each one was more formal than the last, filled with legal-sounding phrases and references to guidelines that were vague at best. One note mentioned non-compliant property structures, another referred to unauthorized use of lake frontage, and yet another suggested a meeting with the association board to discuss his situation. Alex read them carefully, feeling a mix of confusion and frustration. None of the claims made sense. According to his research, his houseboat and dock were well within his property rights. Still, the letters had a way of planting doubt, especially when combined with Karen's vigilant presence across the hedge. Karen seemed to thrive on every development. She walked her dog along the property edge more frequently, peeking at the boat with a critical eye. One afternoon, she lingered at the corner of Alex's property, making casual conversation while nodding the angle of his dock boards. "I'm just making sure everything is in order," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Alex nodded politely, though he felt a tight knot of irritation. Her attention to detail was relentless, and her definition of order seemed to extend far beyond what the association rules actually required. Alex decided to speak directly with the neighborhood board. He wanted clarity, not confrontation. He attended the next board meeting, hoping to present his case calmly and logically. As he walked into the room, he noticed a few neighbors whispering quietly in the corners. Some seemed sympathetic, others reserved, perhaps unsure of how to respond. Karen was already there, seated with her binder neatly arranged, exuding confidence. She glanced at Alex briefly, a subtle smirk forming as if she already knew the outcome of any conversation. When the meeting began, the board chair welcomed Alex politely, but quickly moved to discuss the houseboat issue. Karen spoke first, presenting a carefully prepared summary of her concerns. She emphasized that Alex's dock and boat were not in line with certain neighborhood aesthetics and suggested that they posed a potential precedent for future rule violations. She spoke with conviction, citing the association guidelines at length, though many of her references were vague and open to interpretation. Alex listened quietly, taking notes and resisting the urge to interrupt. Finally, it was his turn to speak. He stood, speaking slowly and deliberately, explaining the legal documents, property surveys, and county records that demonstrated his houseboat and dock were fully compliant. He remained calm, respectful, and precise, highlighting that his property rights were clear and unambiguous. He emphasized that he was not attempting to challenge the neighborhood, only to live peacefully within his own property. The room was quiet as he spoke. Even Karen seemed momentarily unsettled by his clarity. After the meeting, Alex returned to his property, feeling a mix of relief and concern. The board had not made any immediate decisions, leaving the issue unresolved but formally noted. He realized that the letters and meetings were only the beginning, and Karen's scrutiny would not easily wane. Each interaction, each note, each conversation had a way of escalating tension subtly, creating a social pressure that felt heavier than any single legal challenge. At home, Alex reviewed the documents again, carefully organizing every piece of correspondence, survey, and county record. He began constructing a timeline of interactions with the association and Karen, noting dates, times, and specific claims. He realized that preparation would be key. Any misstep could allow the issue to escalate further. With each note, each letter, he became more determined to defend his rights, not through confrontation but through knowledge and careful planning. Late that evening, he sat on his dock, the water reflecting the fading colors of sunset. The lake remained calm, offering a sense of peace amidst the growing storm of social and administrative tension. Alex thought about Karen, about the association, and about the months to come. He understood that he would need patience, clarity, and careful strategy to navigate the situation. The challenge was no longer abstract. It was a tangible test of his resolve, and the outcome would shape not only his property rights, but also the sense of freedom he had sought when moving to the lake. As the stars began to appear overhead, Alex made a quiet promise to himself. He would respond with calm, with facts, and with preparation. He would document everything, anticipate every claim, and ensure that his life on the lake remained intact. The next stage of this quiet battle was only beginning, and he was ready to meet it head-on, armed with patience and knowledge. Alex spent the following days immersed in research. The letters from the neighborhood association were neatly stacked on his desk, each one a reminder of the growing challenge, and yet they also became pieces of a puzzle he intended to solve. He pored over property maps, old survey records, and county ordinances, comparing every line, every boundary, and every clause. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. The association's claims relied heavily on a vague guideline about non-permanent structures near the lake, but the exact language of the rules did not align with his property description. He realized that the key might lie in an older county record from the 1970s. The document described an easement along the lakefront, granting property owners like him the right to maintain docks and small watercraft. It was a formal, recorded document, one that predated the association's current guidelines by decades. In essence, it suggested that any restriction imposed by the neighborhood could not override the legal rights granted by the county. For the first time, Alex felt a spark of hope. He was not simply defending his lifestyle. He might have a legal advantage he had not recognized before. Determined to explore this further, Alex contacted Maya, a lawyer he had heard of through a friend. Maya had a reputation for thorough research and a calm, methodical approach to challenging administrative overreach. When Alex explained the situation, Maya listened attentively, flipping through his notes and the county documents. She smiled, not arrogantly, but with a quiet sense of confidence. "Alex," she said, "these documents are more powerful than you think. We may be able to show that the association's rules, in this specific case, are not enforceable against your property." They began the work of constructing a clear, factual argument. Maya organized the documents into a binder, labeling each piece carefully: property surveys, the 1970s easement, county ordinances, and correspondence from the association. Every letter and note from Karen was cataloged, showing the frequency of her monitoring and the escalation of concerns. Alex learned to keep his own notes of every conversation and observation, creating a meticulous record that could not be disputed. Meanwhile, Karen did not slow down. She continued to post updates on neighborhood forums, often dramatizing the situation in subtle ways to rally sympathy. She organized small discussions with other homeowners, emphasizing the importance of maintaining standards and hinting that Alex's houseboat might set a precedent for others. To outsiders, the conflict seemed to be about rules. To Alex, it was about clarity and fairness. He knew that with the right evidence, the truth would be undeniable. As they prepared, Alex began to appreciate the strategic nature of their work. It was not simply a confrontation. It was a carefully planned effort to highlight facts, timelines, and legal precedents. Maya emphasized calmness and patience. "Your role," she explained, "is to present what is true and documented. Do not let emotion drive the conversation. Facts are your strongest ally." Alex nodded, internalizing the lesson. He began visualizing the potential outcome: a courtroom where clarity and documentation replaced tension and speculation. In the evenings, Alex would walk along the lake, reflecting on the calm water and the tension that had built around it. The houseboat, once simply a vessel of enjoyment, had become the focal point of a legal and social challenge. Yet the more he examined the county records and the association's guidelines, the more he felt prepared. What had initially seemed like a looming threat was now an opportunity to assert his rights and clarify the boundaries of fairness. By the end of the week, the binder was complete, every piece of evidence in order, every timeline documented, and every argument carefully prepared. Alex could almost see the path forward. The next step would be formal, a court proceeding that would demand attention to detail and absolute clarity. The lake remained calm, reflecting the sky as if waiting alongside him. Alex realized that this battle was no longer about tension with a neighbor. It was about knowledge, preparation, and the ability to present truth in a structured, undeniable way. He felt a renewed sense of purpose. What had begun as letters and whispers of complaint had transformed into a clear, factual strategy. With Maya's guidance and the evidence in hand, Alex was ready to take the next step. The challenge ahead would be formal and public, but for the first time, he felt confident that the outcome could reflect fairness and clarity, not assumptions or social pressure. As the days passed, Alex and Maya focused on preparation. They were entering a stage where meticulous attention to detail could make the difference between victory and frustration. Alex spent hours at his desk, reviewing every document, organizing letters from the neighborhood association, cross-referencing property surveys, and making sure every point was backed by official records. Each note, each communication from Karen was cataloged with dates and summaries. Nothing was left to memory. Every interaction became evidence. Maya emphasized the importance of presentation. "Facts alone are not enough," she explained one afternoon. "We must present them clearly and in a way that the court can immediately understand. Timing and organization will give us authority and credibility." Alex nodded, appreciating her calm efficiency. He had learned that preparation was not just about gathering documents. It was about anticipating questions, counter-arguments, and even small surprises that could appear during a hearing. The social dynamics added another layer of complexity. Neighbors whispered in passing, some offering cautious support, others staying silent. Rumors began to circulate about the impending legal challenge, and Alex noticed subtle glances during trips to the mailbox or the grocery store. Karen, as usual, remained vigilant. She watched his routines, taking notes in a small notebook that Alex could see from the corner of his eye during one brief encounter. Despite the tension, Alex remained polite and professional. He knew that any confrontation or visible frustration could be used against him, so he maintained a steady, calm demeanor. At home, Alex practiced explaining the situation out loud. He rehearsed clear, factual statements about property boundaries, easements, and county regulations. Maya occasionally interrupted with corrections or questions, pushing him to clarify points that might seem obvious to him but could confuse a judge or board member. The process was demanding but empowering. Each rehearsal strengthened his confidence and sharpened his understanding of the documents he would present. Evenings were spent walking along the lake, reflecting on the journey so far. The houseboat sat quietly at the dock, a symbol of both freedom and challenge. Alex thought about the hours he had spent fixing the boat, planting small gardens, and maintaining the dock. He realized that what had begun as a simple desire for peace had transformed into a larger lesson about preparation, patience, and the importance of knowing your rights. Each wave that lapped against the dock seemed to echo his growing determination. Meanwhile, Karen's activities did not cease. She organized informal meetings with neighbors, shared updates on social forums, and subtly implied that Alex's houseboat could set a precedent. These actions were frustrating, but Alex refused to respond in kind. Instead, he focused on the tangible, documents, records, and facts. He recognized that while Karen relied on social influence, his strength lay in legal clarity. Maya began building visual aids to simplify the presentation. Maps, diagrams, and highlighted documents were arranged to ensure the judge could immediately see the boundaries, easement rights, and compliance of Alex's property. Every element was designed to be clear, concise, and undeniable. Alex marveled at how much preparation mattered. It was not about confrontation. It was about building a foundation so solid that no misunderstanding could shake it. As the hearing date approached, Alex felt a mix of anticipation and calm. There was no room for anxiety in the face of thorough preparation. He understood the stakes, not just for the houseboat, but for his sense of security and fairness in his home. He reviewed his notes daily, checked the documents, and rehearsed answers to potential questions. Each evening on the dock, he imagined calmly explaining the facts in court, confident that the evidence and preparation would speak louder than emotion or speculation. By the final week before the hearing, every detail was accounted for. The binder was complete, notes meticulously organized, and visual aids ready. Alex felt ready not just to defend his rights, but to present them clearly, confidently, and respectfully. The lake, serene and reflective, reminded him of the peace he was fighting to preserve. This was more than a legal challenge. It was a lesson in patience, diligence, and the power of preparation. With Maya's guidance, Alex knew he was ready for the next step. The day in court where facts, clarity, and calm determination would finally meet the challenge head-on. The morning of the hearing arrived with a crisp, clear sky. Alex awoke before sunrise, his mind unusually calm despite the anticipation that had built over weeks. The lake shimmered faintly in the early light, and for a moment he allowed himself a quiet walk along the dock, breathing in the fresh air and watching the water ripple gently against the posts. The houseboat looked peaceful, as if it, too, sensed the importance of the day ahead. He dressed carefully, choosing a simple, professional jacket and a pair of polished shoes. Nothing flashy, nothing distracting, just neat, practical, and composed. Maya arrived shortly afterward, carrying the carefully prepared binder and a small portfolio of visual aids. She greeted Alex with a reassuring smile. "Remember," she said, "confidence comes from preparation. You know the facts better than anyone. Stay calm, speak clearly, and let the evidence guide the discussion." As they approached the courthouse, the atmosphere shifted. The building loomed with the weight of formality, its stone steps and tall columns a reminder that today was not a casual conversation. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and polished wood, a neutral yet solemn environment. The courtroom was quiet, though a few neighbors had gathered to watch the proceedings. Some faces were familiar, curious to see how the situation would unfold. Corinne sat near the front, her binder neatly stacked and her expression carefully composed. She gave Alex a brief, measured glance, her confidence apparent, though not unshakable. The judge entered with a calm, authoritative presence, and everyone rose in respect. After a brief introduction, the judge explained the process and requested opening statements. Corinne's lawyer went first, presenting the association's case with practiced efficiency. They cited general guidelines, referred to vague restrictions, and emphasized the importance of neighborhood aesthetics. Corinne nodded occasionally, satisfied that the points were being delivered convincingly. To the untrained ear, the argument sounded structured, confident, and serious. When it was Alex's turn, he stood quietly, feeling the weight of weeks of preparation settle into a quiet focus. Maya positioned the visual aids carefully, showing the maps, property surveys, and highlighted documents that demonstrated his rights and the legal easement. Alex began to speak, his voice steady and measured. He presented the facts clearly: the county easement, the property survey, and the documentation showing that the association's claim did not apply to his parcel. Every point was precise, supported by records that left little room for debate. The courtroom listened in silence. Even Corinne's confident composure faltered slightly as Alex referenced official documents and highlighted procedural gaps in the association's claims. Maya guided him with subtle gestures, reminding him of key points and helping organize the presentation in a way that was immediately clear and persuasive. The visual aids reinforced the argument, turning abstract claims into tangible, undeniable evidence. During cross-examination, Corinne's lawyer attempted to challenge the details, questioning interpretations and citing general neighborhood principles. Alex responded calmly, sticking to the facts, citing the documents, and avoiding any personal commentary. Each response was precise and supported by records. The judge listened attentively, occasionally glancing at the binder and maps, clearly following the logical presentation of evidence. By the time the hearing concluded, the atmosphere had shifted. The room, which had begun tense with anticipation, now felt charged with clarity. Alex had presented a compelling, well-organized, and factual argument that left no doubt about his compliance and rights. Corinne and her lawyer exchanged subtle glances, realizing that the case they had assumed was straightforward was, in fact, thoroughly challenged. As everyone stood and filed out, Alex felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The presentation had gone smoothly, the evidence was undeniable, and his preparation had transformed nervous anticipation into calm confidence. Maya whispered a few words of reassurance, reminding him that the judge would review everything carefully before making a decision. Despite the lingering tension, Alex walked back to the car with a sense of quiet pride. Returning home, he paused at the dock, watching the water glint in the late morning light. The houseboat remained steady, a silent witness to the days of preparation and the attention to detail that had brought him to this point. He knew the judge's decision would ultimately determine the outcome, but for the first time, he felt that victory was within reach. The combination of facts, patience, and preparation had brought him to a position of strength, and he felt ready to face whatever came next. The courtroom was still as Alex took a deep breath and prepared for the pivotal moment. He had rehearsed this day countless times with Maya, and now the time had arrived. The judge had already listened to the initial statements, reviewed the exhibits, and allowed cross-examinations. The room hummed with quiet anticipation. Even Corinne's confident demeanor seemed slightly restrained, as if she could sense that the tide was about to shift. Maya leaned toward Alex, placing a hand briefly on his arm. "Remember," she said softly, "clarity and facts. 3 minutes of precise presentation can make a huge difference. Trust the preparation." Alex nodded, feeling a calm focus settle over him. He stood, straightened his jacket, and looked at the judge, ready to present the argument that would turn the case in his favor. The judge gave the floor to Maya, who began to speak with clarity and authority. In those critical 3 minutes, she laid out the evidence with concise, deliberate statements that left no room for ambiguity. She started with the county easement from the 1970s, emphasizing that it granted Alex specific rights to maintain a dock and houseboat on his lakefront property. She displayed the maps, showing how the property boundaries aligned perfectly with Alex's placement of the houseboat. The visuals reinforced the legal facts, making it easy for the judge to follow the argument. Next, Maya addressed the neighborhood association's claim. She explained that the rule Karen had relied upon was not properly adopted in accordance with the association's procedures. She cited meeting minutes, procedural guidelines, and statutory requirements, demonstrating that the rule could not legally apply to Alex's property. Each point was supported by official documentation, leaving no room for counterargument. Karen shifted slightly in her seat, her fingers tapping nervously against her binder. Her lawyer attempted to interject, but Maya anticipated the objections, addressing them preemptively with precise references to the documents. The judge asked a few clarifying questions, and Maya answered succinctly, pointing to the relevant evidence in her binder. Her voice was calm, confident, and unwavering, and it carried the weight of careful preparation and undeniable fact. By the time the 3 minutes were up, the courtroom atmosphere had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a potentially contentious dispute now felt resolved through clarity and reason. Alex could see the subtle change in expressions around the room. Curiosity turned into recognition of the strength of his case. Even Karen's composure had begun to crack. Her smirk had faded into a quiet, tight-lipped concern. The judge leaned back, reviewing the documents once more, then looked up. The evidence presented clearly demonstrates that the property in question is fully compliant with county regulations and that the association's rule cannot be enforced against this parcel, the judge stated. The words hung in the air, precise and authoritative. There was no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. Alex felt a wave of relief, tempered by the knowledge that the ruling was the culmination of weeks of careful preparation, not mere luck or chance. Karen exchanged a brief glance with her lawyer, the realization settling in that their efforts had been insufficient. Alex remained calm, standing with quiet confidence as Maya organized her materials. The courtroom began to empty, neighbors murmuring quietly to one another, some offering congratulatory nods, others simply observing the resolution with curiosity. Alex thanked Maya, feeling gratitude for her guidance, expertise, and calm reassurance throughout the process. Later, as he stepped outside, the sunlight reflected off the courthouse windows, warming the steps as he made his way to the car. The air felt lighter, the tension of weeks lifted. He thought about the lake, the houseboat, and the small dock that had been the center of so much attention. The fight had been challenging, requiring patience, strategy, and unwavering focus, but it had been grounded in clarity, fairness, and preparation. Returning home, Alex walked slowly along the dock, taking in the calm ripples of the water. The houseboat bobbed gently, exactly where it belonged, a tangible reminder of the rights he had defended. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The battle had been won, not through confrontation or drama, but through knowledge, planning, and the careful presentation of undeniable facts. As the sun sank lower, casting long reflections across the lake, Alex sat on the dock, breathing deeply and enjoying the stillness. The ordeal had strengthened him, teaching lessons about preparation, persistence, and the quiet power of calm determination. In 3 short minutes, the truth had been revealed and justice had been served. The houseboat remained, the lake remained, and Alex knew that the home he loved was secure, thanks to patience, clarity, and careful planning. In the days following the courtroom victory, Alex felt a mix of relief, reflection, and cautious optimism. The ruling was clear. His property rights had been upheld, the houseboat was fully compliant, and the association's claims had no legal standing. Yet, even with the official decision in hand, the social landscape of the neighborhood remained nuanced. Whispers traveled quietly along driveways and garden fences. Some neighbors approached Alex with subtle congratulations, offering nods or small smiles of support, while others maintained a careful distance, unsure how to navigate the aftermath. Karen, for her part, became noticeably more reserved. She no longer posted on neighborhood forums with the same intensity, and her casual walks along Alex's property line were less frequent. It was not an overt surrender, but a recognition that the legal framework had been firmly established. Alex noticed the change, but did not dwell on it. He understood that the social ripples of this situation would take longer to settle than the legal ones. Patience, he realized, was as important now as it had been in preparation for the courtroom. The neighborhood association moved quickly to reassess its policies. In board meetings, members discussed the need to clarify rules, ensure proper adoption procedures, and avoid future misunderstandings. Alex followed these developments quietly, noting the improvements in the bylaws and procedural guidelines. There was a sense that the association had learned from the process, though the changes came at the cost of acknowledging the limits of its authority. For Alex, this reinforced the importance of knowledge, preparation, and standing firm when necessary. Life on the lake began to regain its quiet rhythm. Alex spent early mornings on the dock, tending to the houseboat, pruning the small garden, and enjoying the soft glint of sunlight across the water. The sense of home that had initially drawn him here returned, now strengthened by the knowledge that his rights were secure. It was a subtle victory, not marked by fanfare, but by the freedom to live peacefully without fear of arbitrary challenges. The houseboat, once a source of tension, now symbolized resilience, clarity, and careful planning. Neighbors who had observed the legal proceedings from a distance began to adjust their perspective. A few approached Alex with cautious interest, asking questions about the process, the preparation, and how he had navigated the legal system so effectively. Alex answered politely, emphasizing facts, patience, and careful documentation. He avoided criticism or confrontation, focusing instead on helping others understand the importance of clarity and preparation. In doing so, he fostered quiet respect among some who had once been skeptical or indifferent. Karen's presence remained noticeable but diminished. She still maintained her routines, but her interventions were less frequent, her observations less pointed. The legal outcome had shifted the balance, demonstrating the strength of preparation and the power of presenting facts clearly. Alex observed this quietly, recognizing that victory did not require public confrontation or dramatics, just patience, knowledge, and consistent, calm action. During evenings on the dock, Alex reflected on the lessons learned. He thought about the time spent reviewing documents, the hours of planning with Maya, and the importance of maintaining composure in every interaction. The process had not only secured his property rights, but had also reinforced values he now considered essential: diligence, clarity, and calm persistence. The houseboat remained a centerpiece of this lesson, a symbol of how thoughtful preparation could protect what mattered most. One afternoon, a few neighbors joined him on the dock for a small gathering. They admired the houseboat, discussed the lake, and shared quiet conversations about gardening, boating, and community life. There was no overt celebration, no dramatic statements, only a gentle acknowledgement that fairness and preparation had prevailed. Alex felt a quiet satisfaction, realizing that the courtroom victory had ripple effects beyond legality. It had strengthened his confidence, affirmed his diligence, and fostered subtle respect among neighbors. By the end of the week, life had returned to its serene pace. Alex continued his daily routines, mindful of the lessons learned but no longer weighed down by tension or uncertainty. The houseboat swayed gently in the water, reflecting the sky in shimmering patterns, and Alex allowed himself a smile. The challenge had been significant, but the outcome was clear. Through knowledge, preparation, and calm persistence, he had secured his home, defended his rights, and preserved the tranquility that had drawn him to the lake in the first place. Months had passed since the courtroom ruling, and life on the lake settled into a quiet rhythm. Alex woke each morning to the gentle lapping of water against the dock, the soft calls of birds, and the warm glow of sunlight filtering across the lake's surface. The houseboat bobbed steadily in the water, a familiar companion that now represented both freedom and resilience. The tension that had once hung over the property had dissipated, replaced by a calm sense of security and clarity. The neighborhood association had made changes quietly but effectively. Rules were clarified, procedures were reviewed, and any future actions would require thorough documentation and adherence to proper legal processes. Alex observed these adjustments from a distance, recognizing the value of structure and fairness when balanced with respect for property rights. The experience had shown him the importance of knowledge, preparation, and careful attention to detail, not only in defending his own interests, but in fostering a sense of fairness for everyone in the neighborhood. Karen, once vigilant and persistent, had withdrawn from active disputes. She continued her daily routines and maintained her home with precision, but her interventions were rare and measured. Alex noticed her passing occasionally on her walks, a subtle nod acknowledging the boundaries that had been firmly established. There was no animosity in their interactions, only a quiet understanding that the rules, the law, and careful preparation now guided how their lives intersected. Alex also found himself drawn into a more constructive role in the neighborhood. He volunteered to review community guidelines, offering insight into clarity, fairness, and practical compliance. His perspective, shaped by the recent challenge, proved valuable to the board and to neighbors who sought understanding rather than conflict. Meetings became opportunities for education rather than confrontation, and Alex found satisfaction in helping to build a community where rules were clear, transparent, and respectful. Evenings were particularly serene. Alex would sit on the dock, gazing across the lake as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the water in hues of orange and gold. He reflected on the months of preparation, research, and careful documentation that had led to the courtroom victory. He thought about patience, diligence, and the importance of maintaining composure in the face of tension. Each memory reinforced the lesson that persistence, preparation, and respect for process could overcome uncertainty, challenge, and pressure. The houseboat itself became a symbol of the journey he had undertaken. It was more than a vessel for leisure. It represented stability, clarity, and the results of careful planning. Alex maintained it with care, polishing the wood, checking the lines, and ensuring that every detail was in order. The houseboat, once a point of contention, had transformed into a touchstone of achievement and peace. Neighbors continued to interact, some with curiosity, others with quiet respect. A few approached Alex to ask about his approach, wanting advice on how to navigate rules or communicate effectively with the association. Alex shared his experiences generously, emphasizing the importance of documentation, patience, and clarity. He avoided judgment or criticism, focusing instead on constructive guidance. In doing so, he fostered goodwill, understanding, and subtle trust among those who had previously been skeptical. Over time, Alex understood that the conflict had been a turning point. It was no longer about the houseboat alone. It had become a lesson in fairness, knowledge, and the power of preparation. The neighborhood benefited from clearer rules, residents benefited from guidance, and Alex benefited from the confidence that comes from standing calmly and firmly on solid ground. The lake, once a quiet backdrop, had become a stage where patience, clarity, and persistence had played out successfully. As the stars appeared overhead, reflected faintly in the still water, Alex allowed himself a final moment of reflection. The houseboat bobbed gently, the lake remained calm, and the neighborhood had found a new balance rooted in clarity and fairness. Alex understood that challenges would come and go, but the principles he had learned, preparation, patience, and respect for process, would guide him through any future situation. With a quiet smile, he leaned back on the dock, breathing in the crisp night air, and appreciated the home, the lake, and the journey that had taught him so much. The challenge was over, the victory secured, and the lessons remained. Alex knew that living on the lake was not just about property or aesthetics. It was about understanding, preparation, and the quiet strength that comes from knowledge and composure. The houseboat, the dock, and the lake all reflected that truth. With care, patience, and clarity, a home could remain a sanctuary and life could continue in peace. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next mystery on HOA Hunter Stories.